Okay, welcome to our webinar for today. And today we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive into some of the issues surrounding this phenomenon that we're currently faced with, which is the remote working model. When COVID-19 hit, just about everybody had to go home that could go home and work from places such as this, which is my home study at the moment. But now we're starting to see a few restrictions being lifted, and some businesses are starting to plan for post-COVID life. And one of the big issues that they're facing is whether they continue to embrace the remote working model or whether they head back into the office. So we're going to have a bit of a chat about that today. Now, just quickly, LiveTiles, a global company specializing in employee collaboration and communication software, services, and AI for the workplace. So that is who is presenting the webinar today. Speaking of presenting, this is the gentleman that I have with me here today. So to help me discuss these issues today, I've got Dave Hassett, who's the Managing Director of the Hassett Group. Now, the Hassett Group is a boutique executive search and recruitment firm and are talking to clients every day about the issues that we'll be covering today. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Dave's insights today. So welcome along, Dave. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, Chris. Looking forward to having a good chat.
Very excited to hear what you got to say on this topic. So, as usual, if you've been to one of these before, you would know that we're trying to run these as a bit less of a lecture and a death by PowerPoint and more of a conversation. So we'll continue along those lines today. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to post them and I'll do my best to ask them of David. What are we going to go through today? We'll be taking a look at how working models have changed, not just recently, but over the last sort of few decades. We're going to talk about the work from home revolution in depth. We're going to talk about, which is something that David has got some opinions on, is finding talent post-COVID. So has the way that we recruit talent into our businesses changed now that we've got this remote workforce starting to dominate? And then we'll take a bit of a look at some of the cultural effects that working from home does. So let's get into it. Dave, let's talk about the changing landscape of the office environment. What did your first ever workplace look like?
I started my career, Chris, at Ernst & Young, so I was pretty fortunate to have a pretty cracking building in 120 Collins Street in Melbourne, like level 34 or 5, so pretty great surrounds. That said, it was that really traditional work layout with the pods. You had 4 pods together, spattered around the office. It was clearly a very hierarchical setup as well. You had the partners and the directors on the outside of the office building with beautiful views across the bay,
Yes. And
us poor punters close to the door and the bathrooms and the like. So it was a not quite Wernham Hog from the office, but yeah, similar in that respect.
Sounds very familiar. It sounds a little bit better than mine. As I was saying to you off camera earlier, I started my life as a bank teller. So my life was very structured. Start your day at 8:30 and count your cash drawer. You got to break it like 10:15 for 5 minutes. Then your lunch hour was scheduled. Your afternoon break was scheduled. Then you went home after you counted your cash drawer again. And yeah, there was no flexibility whatsoever. And for me, who likes to work flexibly now, back then I look back at that and think, how did I even survive?
Yes, it's pretty Eastern European 1960s sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Things have certainly changed. And look, somewhere in the 2000s, I'm not exactly sure when, but the open plan office became popular. Now, there are two sides to this. Some people hated that they loved that structure, but others just flourished. Where did you sit on this idea?
Yeah, I guess probably not too dissimilar to yourself, Chris. I'm a pretty social being, so the open plan really facilitated the ad hoc chat and the small talk that, talking about the footy or what you did on the weekend and what you're going to be doing on the weekend. So I guess my personal style was appealed to that, but I think from a productivity perspective, I think it really deteriorated the ability for offices to be as productive as they possibly could be. I think where I worked from Ernst & Young, I went to Grant Thornton, which is another big accounting firm, and you'd find that lots of the time people would be talking during the day, and then when it came to sort of 5:30, 6 o'clock, they would then start working. And the optics of that was that they were the hardest working people in the building, and the partners would see them finding away at 6 o'clock at night when their effectiveness or efficiency during the day has been pretty poor. So it often became a bit of a political scenario, but a bit of game playing perhaps.
Yeah, I remember those days where you'd be sitting at your desk waiting for the boss to leave, so he thought you were working the long hours. Absolutely.
Answer, Chris, where you would walk around with the Penske files or allocate an email to be sent 10:30 at night, so
Yeah.
boss thought he was the hardest bloke in the building.
I love it. I love it. And then, of course, we had co-office working spaces becoming popular, and then the IT startups sort of took over and turned the office into a playground in some ways. Do you feel like the 2000s took things a little bit too far and turned the office into more of a playground with your table tennis tables and your bars and that sort of thing than a workplace?
I think that obviously the extraordinary success of Google and Facebook was setting the path, and they really were the trailblazers on those types of working environments. So I think that other tech businesses saw what they were doing, what the great people were doing, what the great businesses were doing, and wanted to emulate that as much as they possibly could. So they thought that was part of their key to success, not the fact that they had an incredible idea and probably the biggest brains at Google and
Yeah.
the fact that I've got a table tennis table or I ride a skateboard through my office is going to lead to great success. And I think, so I think it probably did go too far, Chris. And I think often emerging businesses perhaps felt obliged to invest money that they probably didn't have.
Yes.
These things. I mean, I've seen offices that have got golf simulators in them, and they're 50, 70, 80 grand pieces of equipment. There's offices that have got slides connecting one floor to the next floor. So, I think it possibly did go too far to be the cool kids on the block.
Yeah, I often get called boomer in my office because I'm the oldest in my office, and even some of the little things like having a computer game in the corner or a table tennis table. I sometimes say to the younger people, like, you don't know how good you've got it. Think to me back in the day as a bank teller, like, it's come such a long way, and I say you've got to appreciate this stuff because it's not always going to be this way.
Agreed. And that said, I've been to the LiveTiles office in New York. That is quite an extraordinary stuff there.
It's a great little place for sure. Did you get to play on the swings, did you?
I didn't play on the swings, but I managed to sit around the bar and have a couple of diplomaticos, which was after hours,
of course. Of course. Look, on that whole idea, I guess that the idea of making work more enjoyable helped to blur the lines between work and play, and maybe the whole concept of work-life balance just became life. How do you feel about that? And what about your clients? How do they feel?
Yeah, I certainly think that's a great point. I think to your earlier point, Chris, that back in the day it was very regimented, just the work environment. You had to do certain things at certain times, the clock on, clock off mentality. And obviously technology has provided a scenario or an environment where maximum flexibility can be adopted to suit your own working style and your own, I guess, personal life as well. And I think we'll probably get to it later, but good businesses are entrusting their people to do the right thing when they want to do it. So it becomes more about activity and output, not just those optics that I spoke of earlier. If you want to get up at 6:30 and do your work and maybe go and play golf for a couple of hours or have a hit of tennis during the day, as long as delivering the outcome, that's what it's starting to become far more focused on, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to say that my two Labradors are enjoying this from me because I can take those breaks during the day and take them for their walks. They're loving it and still get the job done. It's so good.
That's right.
And then, look, of course, Corona hit and all of the work-life balance, the co-working, the fun spaces, the snack machines, the nap corners, they turn into kitchens, lounge rooms, and home offices like this. Has Corona killed the work vibe?
It hasn't killed it, I don't think, but it's certainly damaged it. I think it's just making it so much more difficult to keep that genuine vibe. I mean, we're such social beings, us people, and when you don't have the interaction on a daily basis, it's harder to build that rapport. And obviously, businesses and successful sporting clubs spend fortunes on team building exercises because they know that the closer you feel to your colleague, the more you're going to work, the harder you're going to work for them. Yeah. You're going to back them, you're going to go that extra mile and go into battle for them. So hasn't killed it, but it's making it really difficult to maintain that, I think.
Yeah, and of course we're trying our best to sort of keep some of those elements. We've all been working hard at having some fun and creating camaraderie with Zoom calls and meetings where you're wearing your silly hats or your clothes. You had Friday virtual drinks, but is it working? And is this really a long-term play for companies?
I think it's like everything in this unique time, is that we're all thinking on our feet. We're all doing the best that we possibly can in these unprecedented times. So I think it's working for the time being. I think the honeymoon period it's been a bit exciting. It's been a bit new for everyone. But I do have concern. I don't think it's sustainable for successful, thriving businesses to be working solely remotely and digitally for extended periods of time. So I think we're starting to get a bit battle weary from Zooms, and I think really wanting that.
I feel a bit the same too, and I'm just wondering whether maybe at some stage we turn our backs on these things that sometimes feel a little bit contrived, and just accept that for our new normal working arrangement doesn't have as much face-to-face fun in it.
That's right. Yes, I mean, I think it's the fun piece, I guess, is something that you probably thrive or crave rather when you're a younger, in your early 20s and into the late. I guess it was
not like us old blokes.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's young and Grant Thornton were times where I started my career, as I said, in early stages in recruitment, and it was all about the fun and the party and the Friday night drink. I think as your career evolves and as your life stages change, it doesn't have to be about fun, Chris. It's about being engaged and giving a sense of contribution and just being productive and being a part of a winning team. So it doesn't have to be about fun.
Yeah, no, I get you. That whole idea of working within an achievement type culture and achieving together and the sense of camaraderie of a team. I think for me, as I get old, that's probably more about what I'm chasing as opposed to the Friday night drinks. I'm pretty happy just to get home and throw on my slippers and watch a game of the AFL when it starts.
Definitely, yes.
And what about for employers? Is the remote working model something that you think is attractive to an employer long term? Is it something they can sell as a benefit perhaps, or do you think maybe it's actually a must that they need to offer this now?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, as everything, it's evolving from that clock on, clock off mentality that you spoke about early on, to now becoming, we might offer a bit of working from home if you have to occasionally, to now this has really accelerated that evolution or that revolution to now I think it has to be an option. I mean, I live an hour and 15 minutes from my office, and I was driving in 5 days a week, and that was quite draining. I didn't realise how draining it was. Now I've got the benefit of waking up in the morning and walking downstairs. I'm seeing that it can be effective. So I think it's becoming a case, and I think it was often not really encouraged too much by bosses. They didn't trust their people, didn't trust their staff perhaps, and I think that the staff really fed off that. So to now see that we can deliver from our homes, from our around the corner shops, coffee shops and the like, I think that's given a lot of confidence to press on in this trend.
Is that a really important consideration for businesses to look to move to trusting over like a surveillance culture?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you don't trust your people, get rid of them. They're not the right person for you.
For sure.
So I think that's absolutely fundamental to successful businesses is in trusting. So yeah.
Any other key considerations that you think that people, the businesses need to take into account?
I think you need to find the balance between the remote working and the in-person scenario. So I think solely working from home is not, as I said earlier, not sustainable. But I think we need to find that blend. But it comes down to, like all things in relationships in life, Chris, it comes down to managing expectations. And it's all about that appointment time. If you're expecting one thing and you go in and see another thing, both from the employer's perspective and also the employee, it's not going to work. It won't be sustainable. So it's really important to be clear on at the appointment time. This is what the landscape is going to look like. This is what we expect from you, and then ensuring that we can deliver on those expectations. So that is a key factor.
And one final thing, what do you think is the true story here? Is this really about flexibility for employees or cost savings for employers?
I hope it's the former. I hope it is the flexibility piece. That said, I do know that there are probably quite a few businesses that are taking the opportunity to slash costs and sadly get rid of some dead wood. So
Yep.
that's happening out there. So there are going to be, like in all things again, opportunistic people. But I do think fast forwarding 12 months, 18 months from now, I think the workplace will be a far more balanced environment. It'll be more sustainable for people. I think environmentally it's going to be good, less cars on the road, less commute times. So I think it's going to be a positive. I think we'll hopefully see some really good positives out of the back of this.
Do you feel like this is maybe the end of the co-working space companies offering, one office within a greater floor?
In terms of multiple businesses working on the same floor?
Yeah, I don't want to say any brand names, but those companies that rent out an office within a floor, and then there's a shared working space in them, or a place where you go and make your lunch and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the people who have invested in that business that you may be referring to, hoping some ridiculous valuations that have come off the back of that.
Yes.
No, I think those environments are still really great for the right sort of person and the right sort of business at that time in its evolution. So they're great meetings of minds. You can share ideas. The energy in the room is fantastic compared to two blokes sitting in a garage somewhere. I think you can get a benefit from that. You get access to some great facilities that you otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. So I think they serve their purpose. I think they're also great for businesses that they aren't certain what their trajectory is going to be like. There might be 3 staff today, 10 staff in 2 months' time. You don't have to sign up to a lease and hope you get it right and sink significant costs off the back of that. So I think there's still a place for them because they are good environments.
Just got a bit of a question here from Alison Goss. She's curious about the thought of not sustainable for remote work. There are examples of organisations or ways of working that are fully remote. Are there insights from these organisations about how to make it work? Alison, I'm sure that there are insights from these companies that are fully remote. Probably we didn't sort of look to go that deep into that here today, but I'm sure we can probably help find some answers for you around that if that's what you're interested in. So we can probably take that one offline. But thank you very much for your question there, Alison. We might move on to, this is something that really interests me, finding talent post-COVID. So look, one of the things I've been reading a lot about lately is the idea of a business worldwide embracing the remote workforce and what it might do when you're trying to find new talent. In the old model, when you were looking for staff, businesses might be able to attract people from, say, interstate, but most of the time you're looking for the best person in your local area, pretty much, or your state perhaps. Theoretically, with remote working, you can cast your net much farther and wider. Do you think this might become a bit of a reality now?
It's certainly, in theory, it's possible, Chris, I think, and for certain types of roles where you're not client interfacing, you might be hardcore coders that typically don't like talking to people anyway, so it can be, we've seen that many times. I think even perhaps LiveTiles have had quite a broad geographical spread of the developers. So for certain skill sets, it's absolutely achievable. But I don't think that you're not going to build if it's an overwhelming majority of your staff are spread out and not seeing each other on a semi-regular basis. I think the ability to build a thriving culture will be really challenged. It's going to be good for contractors, I think. But if you've got a 3-month contractor, doesn't matter where that person comes because it's quite a transient arrangement. So I think it's achievable for certain scenarios, but it has to be, again, for shorter periods of time, I think.
Could it be risky to hire someone and then immediately say to them, okay, you're working from home?
Well, yes, absolutely it can be. Again, they don't get the opportunity or the benefit to assimilate and get a sense of the culture of the business. What are their standards? They're not learning from better people around them. They're hearing people on the phones and in meetings. You don't get that access quite as much from a remote working scenario. I think just perhaps also there are a lot of risks around perhaps sourcing staff from around the globe. You don't know, accreditations may not be the same. There's going to be different attitudes towards things like religion and sexuality, perhaps. These are big issues that we just take for granted in a great country like Australia as being the norm. But if you're coming from different parts of the globe, that's not going to be a given, I think. And then, we've got scenarios like Dr. Patel. I don't know if you know that case. If you recall, Dr. Jayant Patel is Dr. Death, and quite an extreme example, of course, but he was trained as a doctor in India, moved to the US, did some training there, lost certain accreditations. So then he, in a given area of the US, then moved to Oregon, where he had no licensing but continued to practice certain surgeries. And then there was quite a few deaths that resulted from his activities over there. But then the Bundaberg Hospital still recruited him because they were so desperately in need of a surgeon. He was able to source a couple of references from the US who gave him a positive reference, and the rest is history. So I think that there's a lot more moving parts around sourcing people globally, and there's a lot more risks. So I think tread warily. It can be done, but just be cautious.
It's funny, when I was preparing all of my notes for this, I love sneakers and I love my Nike Air Maxes. And my young daughter was sort of reading through some of my notes and stuff. She said, "Oh, Daddy, that means you can go and work for Nike one day." I was like, "Oh, yeah, well, maybe I could, but like perhaps the grass isn't always greener." And then I sort of was talking about it with my wife. I said, "Look, if you went and worked for an American company, you then take on all of their employee kind of situations, So we've got it pretty good here in Australia with the way that our employees are treated with workplace relations and stuff. But you go to another country and you might not get, 4 weeks annual leave, or you might be able to get fired on the spot and things like that. There's those kinds of considerations. It sounds like a great idea to be able to sort of take your skills worldwide, but maybe there are a few more things to consider in all of this.
Yeah, I think so. There's also additional costs around accounting fees, administration costs. Tax laws are going to be so significantly different across the board as well. So if you're going to, obviously there's the outsourcing model of, if you want to source people from around the globe, you go through these BPOs that are emerging quite prevalently at the moment. So if are you familiar with that model, Chris?
Yes, yep.
BPOs, yeah. So they're obviously for cost savings, and there's lots of them in I think the Philippines and parts of India and other regions.
Yeah. Let's chat a little bit about the cultural effects of this whole work from home revolution. So if we're heading towards this idea, there has to be effects on corporate culture. I think you mentioned it before, that if you don't see each other face to face semi-regularly, how do you build a culture?
It's tough. Again, it probably comes back to that managing expectations. If you're going into it thinking or knowing that you're not going to have that interaction with people on a day-to-day basis, you're probably going to be quite comfortable in that scenario, and that's what you've signed up for. But yeah, I guess you've got the intranets. You've got to because I suppose the building of culture becomes getting to know each other better. And you see, high performance teams is all about what your colleagues' kids are doing. You know what they're, you share each other's journeys on a day-to-day basis, and you enjoy the wins with them. You share the hard times with them as well. So if you're wanting to go down a strongly digital or remote working scenario, you just need to have mechanisms in place that allow you to communicate regularly. Really agile platforms, perhaps LiveTiles deliver similar certain technology that
yes.
Internet's there, Chris. So
absolutely. So I think we sort of touched on it earlier, but like really this whole working from home culture does lose that human connection. Some would say it doesn't matter, but I would say if you've ever worked in a culture where that human connection is very strong and you've achieved together and had great times, you would say you definitely would miss that with remote working.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, I think you go to work to obviously be fulfilled and contribute, but it's all about enjoying the wins together. If we have a good patch at work, we at my business, we love going out for a long lunch and having a few extra wines and just getting to know each other on that informal basis. So again, it's going to be pretty challenging to get that genuine rapport. The energy in the room is so important for me anyway. I'm sure it's probably similar for most people out there. So it definitely comes with complexity to have a genuine rapport.
Could it potentially be a generational thing, that this change that we're seeing now, that maybe the next generation, the one after that, looks at this as a completely different way. So I think of my kids who are all on their devices, they couldn't care less about seeing person face to face potentially. So is it the fact that us, the old boomers, that we need to get used to this might be the new way of working, the new way of building a culture, and that people coming after us are quite okay with it?
I think that's quite possible. Yeah, I mean, I've always argued that I think that dinner parties, so digressing somewhat, but you might have seen in 10, 15 years' time that virtual reality will allow us to sit at our couch in our house and have a dinner party with 10 or 12 other people. You get Uber Eats, you order the same meal, you don't have to worry about drink driving issues, or you can have a few beers or wines at home. So that is unfathomable to me, who's pretty old school, pretty traditional, and certainly the prospect of never working in an office with other people is so foreign to me, and I'm sure it is to yourself as well. But so never say never, Chris. So I think it's a moving target for sure.
I know here in our Hobart office, we're slowly moving back into our workspace, just little bit by little bit. We had a day this week where, there's a half a dozen of us back in there, and oh wow, just been able to talk to someone, have a casual conversation from 2 meters away we were, because we've got social distancing obviously, but just better have that casual conversation as you're working away. It was like, oh, I've really missed this. This is what it's all about.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's fantastic. How many have you got down there in Hobart?
There's about 15 in the office, but we're sort of coming back just a few at a time, just on a bit of a rotating basis. So looking forward to one day getting us all back in there, because I think personally, from a mental health perspective, which was going to be my next question, look, for me, it's important to get back there to look after my mental health. But do you think remote working could, really create that problem of mental health issues?
I think it's an absolute given, and we've seen so many resources being put into organisations like Beyond Blue in anticipation of this isolation. Again, we are social beings, and this is really creating a real problem of isolation. So I think absolutely it's going to lead to a proliferation of increased mental health issues, and we need to be conscious of that. We need to be, if you're an introvert, as you say, you're probably loving it, or if you're 22, you're loving it because you don't have to worry about these conversations with people face to face. But for those who are extroverts, it's really taking its toll on them, and it's incumbent on each of us to reach out to our colleagues and check in with them, make sure they're going okay, and not on work issues, just on the personal side of things. So we have to work harder to maintain that mental health at the moment. It's really a big issue.
On that topic, I didn't have a slide in to throw in here on this. I spoke a little bit about last week, but we've been working on this great little solution at LiveTiles called LiveTiles Vibe, which is basically a check-in mechanism for staff. We're going to be surfacing it through Microsoft Teams and potentially in other ways. But if you're interested in this, jump onto our website, livetiles.nyc, and look under the solutions page for LiveTiles Vibe. It's a very quick little in the moment survey where a question will pop up and say, how are you feeling today? And you click one of the faces, from a frowny face through to a smiley face. And then that data is collated in the background so that, we can check in on people and make sure that they are okay when they're working remotely. We strongly believe that this little piece of software is something that we really, really need right now in this new environment, and will really provide some benefits. So if anybody is interested in that, you can contact me through the channels here, or jump onto the LiveTiles website and check it out. So I think it's going to be a bit of a game changer for us. So thanks for that beautiful little segue there, mate. It was great. As well. Let's quickly just touch on what might the future hold. Look into your crystal ball, Dave. Where are we heading with this? Is it going to be traditional, work from home, or some hybrid model?
I think for me, it's pretty clear. It has to be a hybrid model, Chris. I think enforcing in the office every day is not the reality any longer. It's not the expectation. But for the reasons we've already spoken about, having too much of a remote setup won't allow for businesses to create that great culture that's so critical. So I think it has to be a hybrid. It's make it work for you. We expect to see you here. We want you to contribute to the culture of our business. But we understand that your personal scenario is very different to the person you sit next to in the office. So like football clubs these days. Back in the day, you know, everyone had to do exactly the same training. You have to do your crazy runs and you know, intense weight sessions and all the rest of it. But now they're tailoring that to suit each individual. What does that individual need? And we're seeing it in all walks of life. It's about becoming a more bespoke and tailored solution for the individual.
Sounds good, mate. Sounds good. Sounds like a really nice way to wrap this chat up. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you for jumping on today and sharing your insights around this. I know people will really get some benefit out of this, because this is an issue that is facing every single business right now. So, David Hassett, thank you for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. I'll just quickly flick on to our plans for next week before we let you all go. So next week, I'm actually inviting back our Chief Product Officer, Simon Tyrrell. He presented at a Microsoft 365 online event about a fortnight ago, and the response to that session was really, really positive. So I've invited him back into this arena next week at a slightly later time of 9:30 Australian Standard Time. And he's going to take us through his insights on what we're calling Teams Phase 2. So from video conferencing to a thriving hub of productivity. So Teams right now is a very hot topic, and a lot of people are just using it for things like this here today, where we're having video calls. And we're going to talk in depth about some of the other things that you can do with that, including a few little mini demonstrations of a few pieces of LiveTiles tech that really augment the Microsoft Teams experience. So look out for that one. And Dave, mate, thank you very much for joining me again today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Stay warm.
Yeah, you stay warm. It's freezing down here today. Thanks very much for your time today, mate.
Good to see you. Thanks, Chris.
Good on you. Cheers, mate. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.